John Mogul. I am Associate Director for Curatorial and Education here at the Wilsonian, and I'm very pleased that we are this year, as we have for many years, collaborating with MDPL to bring you this series of talks and panels and other events. I was not here yesterday, but I understand from my colleague that we had a terrific day here, and I fully expect the same today. We are especially excited to participate in Art Deco Weekend this year because for the first time we are presenting in our galleries a major exhibition about Art Deco design and decorative arts. It's called Deco Luxury to Mass Market. And you are all welcome to, after the talk is over, to go up and see that exhibition, which I think you will enjoy a great deal, as well as all the other exhibitions that we have. We're offering complimentary admission to anybody who's here for one of the Art Deco Weekend talks. If you did not already get a sticker when you came in, you're very welcome to find me after the talk. I'll be in the auditorium here, and ask me for one. I have a roll of them here. They look like this. So we're going to be starting out this morning with the second in a three-part series of talks about preservation, past, present, and future. Yesterday morning, or yesterday at noon, we had the talk about the history of preservation in Miami Beach. This morning we're talking about present developments, and introducing the panel and moderating will be Tanya Bott, the person who's very involved in these developments as president of Miami Beach United. So I'm going to turn it over to Tanya. Thank you very much.
I'm going to see if I can see over the podium here. Can everyone hear me back there? Everything good in the back?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning. Before I start, I want to see a show of hands. Who here is an out-of-town visitor? Welcome to Miami Beach. I hope you're having a fantastic weekend. I'm asking, there's no wrong or right answers. I just wanted to understand how much background to provide. My name is Tanya Bott. I am on the board of the Miami Design Preservation League. I'm also the president of Miami Beach United, which is an activist organization to sort of bridge the divide between residents and City Hall. Before I talk about this panel and this awesome topic, which is really going to be fun, I do want to let you know, in case you haven't already heard, obviously this lecture series is sponsored by Miami Design Preservation League in conjunction with the Wilsonian. If you don't have your schedule for events, I have some up here. You can pick them up afterwards. So once the rain completely abates, which I think it's in process of, and after you are done with the lectures, please come see all the different cool activities. And if anybody has not yet joined Miami Design Preservation League, there's a membership special this weekend, so instead of the usual $50, you can join for $25, and that includes not just the regular tour that members are granted as part of their membership, but also the annual collectible poster, which is a $40 value. So really, you should get 2 memberships, because it's just so silly to not take advantage of such a great deal. But anyhow, I digress. So does everybody here know about, well, first of all, who here knows where Ocean Terrace is? Everybody? Most people? Ocean Terrace is this beautiful little plot of space just across the street from the ocean in North Beach, from 73rd Street to 75th Street. And it's kind of a little bit of a forgotten in time space. There's some beautiful buildings up there. There are some that are active, there are some that are not, there are some that are in great shape, there are some that are not. But a few years ago, there's this guy named Sandor Scher, who we were hoping to have on the panel, but he had a conflict of previously scheduled plans. But this guy named Sandor Scher, who is a pretty well-known developer in Miami Beach, he's done fantastic projects like the Raleigh and the Standard and the Shelbourne Soho Beach House. So he's a developer with good preservationist instincts. He came up with an idea for a really tall, big, fancy, fabulous new building right in the middle of Ocean Terrace. 22 stories, 250 feet, and literally across the street from the ocean. And the neighborhood said, not so fast. everything around that neighborhood other than the Saint-Tropez, which is looked at as a mistake that was built before the zoning and protection was put in place in the 90s. Everything else is about 75 stories high, and this would be a really big change. Excuse me. This is a story of what happened. It's current, it hasn't been built yet, but it has been approved. Not to tell you this story, how the story ends, but it's been a really interesting process. This is a city where preservation defines us in many ways, and development defines us in many ways. You hear people on either end of the spectrum hurling vitriol and accusations of each other, at each other, and saying things that are really not constructive. And what I would hope from this presentation is that you come away with encouraged that there's another way to proceed, that if everyone stops to take a listen and to compromise and find solutions, and to hear what needs to happen and hear what people want to live with, then you can actually come away with a pretty awesome project. There's a lot of stuff going on in North Beach right now. This is the most complete of the projects in terms of the stage that it's at. Hopefully in a year or two, as Tom mentioned, we'll be back to talk about some more cool new things happening in North Beach that will also hopefully be going through this kind of really collaborative process. So you're not here to listen to me, you're here to listen to the experts, so I will introduce them to you and then let them take it away. So the first person you're going to hear from this afternoon is Jared, in the middle. Jared Green is the VP of Development for Ocean Terrace Holdings, which is the development company that is the subject of today's discussion. Canadian, but don't hold that against him. He's a graduate from McGill University with an MBA from Cornell in hospitality and real estate finance and investments, and he spent time living overseas, a tour guide in Italy, and he moved to Miami in 2010 and started working with Ocean Terrace Holdings in 2015. You are then also going to hear from Cesar Garcia Pons. Some of you may know him well. He's a valued, beloved fixture in Miami and Miami Beach. He is an architect, LEED certified, urban designer, planner. He's worked in our neighborhoods for 25 plus years. He has been instrumental in doing all sorts of wonderful things for Miami Beach and being the voice of reason in many, many, many interesting projects. And one just around the corner from us right now, actually you might not know about, is Lomas Park. He was instrumental in making that stretch of sand into the great beachfront park that it is now. And last but certainly not least, I think probably everybody who lives in Miami Beach knows Tom Mooney at the end there. He is the director of the planning department for the city of Miami Beach. He has the unenviable job of being the referee in all of this. He is a font of knowledge and information. He is just the facts, nothing but the facts, but ask him any detail about historic preservation and architecture, and he knows it. So you wouldn't necessarily see it on his sleeve that he's a preservationist, but he is a Miami Design Preservation League certified tour guide. So that should tell you something. Together, the three of them are going to give you really great insights into what happened, as long as I can figure out how to work the presentation. So, give me a second.
Thanks, Tanya. So I actually had a few questions to ask you as well this morning. Tanya took 3 out of 4 of them at the beginning, because I just wanted to get a sense as to who was in the audience. The one thing I also wanted to ask was there's a lot of people in here who know where Ocean Terrace is, but who knew where it was more than 5 years ago? Okay. To just, fewer than it was. The block has certainly gotten a lot of attention, obviously because of this project, but North Beach itself, It's certainly got attention over the years. So most of you are familiar with the block. It's about a 2.2 acre site, 74th and 75th to the north and south, and Collins and Ocean Terrace to the east and west. The ocean obviously due east, and then low-rise buildings just to the west. It's actually when the city was going through the Plan Novi process in 2016, we're actually going through and working through the design of our projects. We were able to participate in that process and really extract a lot of the feedback that residents provided during that time. And we also were able to solicit feedback from the historic preservation community to then compile all of those things into the approved project that we have today. So the North Beach Master, this area is located in 2 historic districts, one on the National Register and one local district. Pretty much our sort of conceptual approach with how to approach this 2.2 acre block was really to restore the historic sort of through adaptive reuse, sort of adapt the obsolete, as well as bring sort of a new use to the area in terms of sort of the residential. As you can see, so our architects actually had gone through and documented and took a very close eye at all the properties on the block. We own 12 out of 13 parcels on the block. The bottom left corner in blue is excluded from our assemblage and is not part of our development plan. The rest of the buildings, as you can see here, is sort of an inventory of all the historic significance of the historic properties of the properties on our block. They are all considered contributing, but after our historic architect had gone through looking at their current state as well as their architectural details, decided that 3 of these buildings were actually architecturally significant. And those are in orange, so D, G, and H. So on the east side, on the right side, you've got 7450. To the south of that, you've got 7436. And on the west side, on Collins, you have 7433, which is, everybody probably knows as the Curry building. This is just sort of a sense of some of the historic reference photographs that our team used in sort of looking at what was, and also figuring out how to sort of adapt and design this project for today. And this graphic just sort of shows you the extensive documentation process that we went through. All the buildings were digitally scanned as well as surveyed to sort of look at each building in its entirety. And then after, because we're dealing with an entire block, put them together, both from Ocean Terrace, as well as, just not sure what it's. There we go. Leave that there. All right. To connecting to Collins Avenue. So even just Plan Novi, I think just as we participated in that endeavor, realized there were sort of 3 main themes that came out of that process. One was that the residents really wanted new retail and entertainment in their neighborhood. They wanted to create walkable and bikeable places. And the third thing was that they really wanted a neighborhood scale for any type of redevelopment in the area. So in terms of, this is sort of a sense of things we heard and the things we were able to sort of incorporate. So preserving the character of Ocean Terrace neighborhood. The importance was sort of maintaining the scale, mass, and character of a lot of these buildings along the block. I think looking at the Ocean Terrace area between Ocean Terrace and Collins and then everything further west, you've got the lower rise buildings, and there is a distinct difference between this sort of section versus everything on the west side of Collins. The next thing is really develop an active and pedestrian-friendly Ocean Terrace. So we really, in hearing this feedback from the community, really focused on bringing retail uses to the block that brought much needed activation to this stretch of oceanfront land. The rest of this, I mean, I'm just going to start moving forward through them. If we want to go back to any of these for reference through, during the Q&A, we can as well. But this just sort of shows you the extent of documentation that went into it, but also looking at the proposed design. This is very close to what is out there today, just with some sort of minor refinements. But the aesthetics and the historic character is all preserved. And this is of the Broadmoor. So I'm just showing you the 3 buildings that were determined to be truly sort of not necessarily contributing, but architecturally significant. The next is the Ocean Surf, which is 7436, just to the south. So these 2 buildings currently are operational hotels. They're each about 90 keys each. Independent, Broadmoor's probably a 3-star hotel. This is probably a 2-star hotel today. And then Curry's is the 3rd building. This, I think, is going to be the most exciting of the buildings that we're sort of working on in this redevelopment plan. It's going to see probably its biggest transformation, sort of from its current dilapidated state. It was initially designed in 1938 and has got a lot of really nice historic charm that we hope to bring back. And now there's just some renderings of the project. It just shows you along Ocean Terrace at 75th and Ocean Terrace looking south. You've got the Broadmoor on the side. These are just placeholders in terms of color and such, but it just shows you what is going to be on the sidewalk, the activation, really how, if you were to go there today versus what we're showing you, is going to be a very different place in terms of experience, not necessarily in built form. Some of these facades, not necessarily the building in the middle and the one to the right. I take it for granted that everybody doesn't do this every day for the past 4 some odd years, so they don't really know the addresses by sort of ingrained in their head. But the middle building and the one to the right, those 2 are pretty much staying as is. The one to the left is 7430. Certainly that building from its current use, some of the characteristics, the facade, making it more, adapting it to be able to use for retail use. So bringing down some of the storefronts, the doors, you can get a sense of that. This is a rendering from looking just southwest. You can see the residential tower in the back, as well as the hotels. Those 2 buildings, the one on the right and the middle one with the circles, the Ocean Surf building, those 2 are going to be combined to be the hotel. And then there's retail along the rest of Collins, and there's the front door of the condo as well. And that's just sort of a rendering showing the condo, as well as there's going to be an amenity deck set back from the historic facades about 40 feet in the air. This is off of 75th Street. It's just, I guess, to the west of Ocean Terrace. This is the entry into the hotel. We've separated the entries from the hotel and condo. Condo is off of 74th Street, and the hotel is off of 75th. This is along Collins. This is at the corner of Collins and 75th, looking southeast. You can see the green wall that's set back from the historic facades, as well as the podium, the amenity deck that's above, about 40 feet up. That's on top of that. That's wrapping the entire site, but set back. So as I was saying before, the scale, mass, and character of those buildings are maintained. This is just a look north of Collins to give you a sense of that retail experience. And then this is something, I don't know if anybody here knows where Sunset Harbor is, but Sunset Harbor is a sort of a pretty, you do? Oh, okay. I mean, it's a great place. A lot of people, I mean, there's a restaurant, but if you actually look at the evolution of that neighborhood, it didn't just start and become what it is. I remember going there years ago when it was Joe Allen was there, and there was nothing else. And then, and then you got Pub Belly, and like all these different, but it started and it's been sort of an iterative organic process. Anyway, there's a design element in that sort of newer part of Sunset Harbor, which was a breezeway. And so we've toyed back and forth, removing the breezeway, bringing it in, taking it out. And what we realized is to have to walk from 74th to 75th, instead of being able to have some kind of pass-through through the site, as much as we're part of a city, going through the site, we felt it was very important to be able to access the ocean and really make the internal site the arrival experience from the hotel or the condo not feel sort of like an alley. And so that's what you're seeing here. This is looking east, and you can see the ocean in the periphery. And then this is just sort of an overview looking at the project. And probably over time, but I just want to give everybody a good sense of what we're looking to do and the sort of the iterations that came before it.
So for those of you who have not been living and breathing North Beach development for the last couple of years, Plan Novi is a plan that was initiated by the city to take a look at a comprehensive way of addressing North Beach development. There's a lot of feeling that it's been sort of stagnant, and that's a good thing for those of us who love its kind of slow, calm pace, but it does need a little bit of TLC, and so the question was, how do you revitalize a part of the city that hasn't been getting a lot of attention without decimating the population that lives there, and how do you do it while still protecting the incredible inventory of mid-century modern architecture that's up there, as well as some of these older buildings. And so that was a fantastic, very comprehensive plan put together by Dover Kohl, and had 1,000 different residents, 1,000 residents participating, various charrettes and programs. So that's the reference to Plan Novi. Because the challenge is, of course, how do you bring new development that preserves individual buildings, but how do you bring in new development that doesn't destroy the context of the neighborhood? So one of the things that is also important is how do you get to and from parts of the neighborhood? And Cesar is going to talk about the plan that he's envisioning. It's a very, very beginning part of the process. So Tom will talk about what the process will actually be for both of these projects, but I'm going to turn it over so that Cesar can put you into his frame of mind here. Oh, it's the next one, I'm sorry. Sorry, everybody.
You want me to do it again?
Okay.
Full screen?
Yes.
Hey everyone, my name is Cesar Garcia-Pons. I'm happy to see you all with the rain this morning. I thought the crowd would be half as wet, so thank you for coming out. My beginnings with preservation probably started in the mid-90s when I lived right down the street here and was very active in the Flamingo neighborhood section of the Miami Beach Community Development Corporation. At that time, as many of you all know, the buildings and preservation of the buildings was something that was, I think, well on its way to being something that everyone agreed with. And it was a really wonderful time to be here. And the preservationists, we were all preservationists at that time, having come out of a rougher time when all of us were not preservationists. My interest then, I realized, was less about the buildings, thinking that all of my neighbors were taking care of preserving every building on the beach, and it was great, and the preservation of districts. I started thinking about the preservation of the experience of walking and living in South Beach, particularly as a resident, because we residents weren't quite in charge of our destinies. It was more, city staff and developers. Since that time now, as Tanya mentioned 20 plus years ago, I'm still interested in the same thing. It's about the preservation of neighborhoods, the characteristics of the neighborhoods, and the public spaces that we work through, because buildings are just assemblages that create space, as far as I see it, that we all publicly enjoy versus privately enjoy. My experience with Ocean Terrace started with working with Jared's team after the referendum that Tanya mentioned, is really rethinking of the Ocean Terrace project you just saw in context. It wasn't really about one block or one building. It was about how this project will help or hinder the entirety of the neighborhood. So with some locals up there, we started taking a tour of what I call now the Ocean Terrace neighborhood, which is what's outlined with the black line there from from the ocean to Santa Barbara Coastal, and then from 73rd to 75th Street. And if you look closely, you can see that the block structure, the street structure, is different in these 3 blocks, or these 2 blocks, than it is to the north and to the south. So it really was a different neighborhood. There was a different development character. It felt different. But it wasn't really pleasant. I'm going to show some slides of what happened. So maybe, and I'm going to get the dates wrong because it feels like 1,000 years ago and yesterday that we started this project, where after Plan Nobi, which was an amazing, amazing master plan done by my colleagues over at Dover Kohl, of which the city was an absolute great partner, dozens of public meetings, really wonderful public input. We learned through that process that one of the things they wanted to see was Ocean Terrace in a new way, revitalize Ocean Terrace in some way, and some other elements of this particular neighborhood. We reconstituted the advisory committee that was part of the city working with Dover Kohl on this. And then we thought, how can we go to the next level? Because a master plan looks at the entirety of the neighborhood. We wanted something a little bit more fine-grained so that we could go to the city and say, do this. The residents want you to do this. And that's what this study that I'm going to present to you now is. So you can see generally here, the way that I take notes is I take notes in space. It's really about what did I hear about things around this particular location. You can see that there were many thoughts from Ocean Terrace all the way to the edge, and it really was about the entirety of the neighborhood versus one particular small area. We then synthesized this down into 10 projects that we think, if thought of or rethought of or redesigned in some way, could improve the neighborhood while still maintaining the character of the neighborhood. Of those 10 projects, 6 of them were kind of new. 5 of them were really new, and 5 of them the city had already been working on some of the things that they wanted to work on. What we're showing today, again for condensed reasons, is we're just going to focus on a couple of the 5 new projects within the area. You can generally see to the right is going to be Ocean Terrace, and then those 2 horizontal stripes are 74th and 75th Streets. So the first one is Ocean Terrace, and really thinking of Ocean Terrace is the front yard of the Ocean Terrace neighborhood. It is the public space, the only public space that's available for all the people within that particular neighborhood, and its success, we believe, is the success of Ocean Terrace. Can you help me out? So this is referring back to Plan Nobi. In Plan Nobi, it was identified as a project that we wanted to look at. If you look at the top left, you can see the existing streetscape per Dover Kohl's drawings, and the bottom, a potential future, which is maybe a little bit less parking and rethinking of the entire public space. We agreed with that and we expanded upon that. Thank you. So this is the section. Many people can't read sections. The section's on top, the plans underneath, and what this is really meant to identify is, if you look at just the tree canopy, there are 8 palm trees on Ocean Terrace. That's it. There is not a tree, there's nothing else, there's 8 palm trees. There is about 120 feet of hardscape. 60 of it is asphalt for cars. So if we think of this as the public space or the front yard of Ocean Terrace, we're really talking about the front yard of Ocean Terrace is a parking lot, right next to the ocean. So I don't believe, and hopefully maybe you guys don't believe, that a parking lot is the best and highest use for an oceanfront property, but it does serve a purpose because, like Ocean Drive, it is a unique characteristic that you can actually drive or walk or experience on the ocean as a public member. So we like that aspect of it, but we don't like a lot of the existing aspects of it. So we went through many iterations, and through some input we got from the neighbors is, let's rethink it from this very linear asphalt hardscape experience to something that's a little bit more organic, a little bit more curvilinear, a little bit more doing with the ocean, the dunes, and the landscape. And we thought, yes, let's try to do that. So there's a couple things we thought of, and this is a section plan. We're going to have more details of this, but let's rethink the way that we're organizing the street. Instead of having a straight shot, and I liken it to a bowling alley that's 2 blocks long of 60 feet of asphalt, is what if we reduce the asphalt from 60 feet with perpendicular parking to 40 feet maximum, and increase the public area on the left towards the buildings and the right towards the beach, depending on where you are. So that instead of having 10 feet, 10 feet, 10 feet, 10 feet, 10 feet stripes of things, you now have 30, 40 feet, 30, 40 feet of public spaces. That really changes it, and also gives us the opportunity to create a landscaped area that is much more enjoyable and meaningful than if we did it. So this is a very conceptual plan. On the left is going to be 73rd Street, north is to the right, which is 75th Street. And if you can see the curviness of the dune, we're going to call it, is the intent was to push and pull the boundaries of landscape and build form so that you can get more dune-like native landscape into Ocean Terrace. And you can also push a lot of the hardscape, public hardscape plaza towards the beach. Also getting rid of that, again, bowling alley effect of asphalt for cars. And then so that when you're driving through, if you're driving through, you're driving very slowly, and you're actually not looking at the end of the street, looking at many things happening through there. 3 slides to the south. The intent here is to be able to close Ocean Terrace, like we have right now. We have Ocean Drive closed today for events. It's, people really love that kind of experience. Is to have a similar potential up in the north, is create areas to still drop off your car, drop people off, and go away and park, but be able to close the street. So on the Banshell Park side, again, for those of you who know where it is, on the south side, is create a roundabout or a cul-de-sac so that you can drop people off and go, or even if you're going to the beach, you can drop people off in the coolers and go. But then the pedestrian version of it, or pedestrian-friendly version of it, happens to the right. You get some conceptual images and pieces to it. In the center, push the road up to the building so that you can do the functions of drop-offs and Ubers and taxis, etc. And then push the center of 74th Street as a public plaza over to the beach so that you can sit on 74th Street and be a few feet away from the dune planting in the ocean, really again rethinking the way that the entirety of the right-of-way is utilized. And then on the north, the Altos Del Mar Park, which is what's on the right-hand side, is currently under construction. The city is going to be finishing it up soon, is integrating that all-new construction into Ocean Terrace and really rethinking this as a complete pedestrian experience from Altos to Banshell Park, and quite frankly, even further along the Atlantic Coast Greenway, or the whatever it is you guys call it now, that goes from 83rd Street all the way down, hopefully soon, to South Point. And this is a couple of sections of what that looks like. This one here, you can see the dune planting coming east or west towards the buildings. And you can see the cars are somehow embedded in there, not too much. And then also the plaza coming out towards the beach so that the public realm goes out. So again, thinking of this sort of wave organic pattern versus this linear pattern. And these are just very rough three-dimensional drawings to get a sense of how these things work. The paving is not designed, the trees are not designed, but it's really giving you the cul-de-sac turnaround drop-off area for everyone and the connection to the Atlantic Greenway. And then when you get up close, again, we don't have the buildings here, but you can see the landscape pushing up towards the buildings, and then if you go further, you see the plaza pushing out. So I think that's an important part, or the linchpin project of Ocean Terrace, but also as important is a little bit further to the west, is to get people who live in the west coming towards the east, is Collins Avenue. And if you know Collins Avenue, again, it's 80 feet of concrete that goes through, and it's, how many people like crossing Collins Avenue at this location? It is very dangerous, very, very dangerous. So what we're thinking is, how can we redesign it in such a way that you can still function as a Florida Department of Transportation corridor, but make it feel a little bit better. There's somebody in my little happy guy. But if you have 74th and 75th, the intent is to really focus on the crosswalks and then the design of the right-of-way so it doesn't feel like a shotgun of the right-of-way. And then the 72nd Street project is something that you may have heard of already. It's the surface parking lot that's going to be redone as part of the Dover Kohl master plan. You can see on the top image, this was phase 1. On the bottom right image is phase 2, and there's some civic uses and some parking structure uses. The city is currently working on a whole slew of different site configurations. These are just some diagrams of things that they're considering. And then we're just looking at one of those options and thinking, thinking about how can we cross the street, because we want Ocean Terrace, or people who live in the Ocean Terrace or the town center that Tom's going to talk about, to feel like they can easily connect over towards the beach. And then if you look at it, the intent is to bring the landscaping across the street, bring the physical connections across the street, and then front the Banshell part with some sort of retail area so it feels like a front door towards the bench shell. I have a sense, again, of the same kind of organic hardscape landscape mixture. You get a sense on the image on the right, the building on the left of the image on the right is the new building. Put some retail, put a plaza, and then really think about how you connect across so that it feels like it's part of the Ocean Terrace frontage neighborhood. And then more specifically is physically how to get there. This is 74th Street, which is kind of the middle street in the Ocean Terrace neighborhood. If you look at the section on the right, there are, and this is true, literally 0 trees in the right-of-way, not one. Any trees that are there in the private areas. So it's about 60 feet of right-of-way with lots of space for cars and very little space for people. The intent here is to squeeze it a little bit, widen the sidewalks, and to create wider, more pedestrian areas and be able to plant trees in them. In this particular case on 74th Street, there will be a trade-off, or there may be a trade-off of parking. You will lose about 20 parking spaces, which is definitely a no-no for a lot of people, but you gain more than 40 trees. And then 75th Street is the next one up. And this is almost at the end. Can you go back one time? Backwards. One more. Okay. So this is 75th Street, which is the same. It's 65 feet. And in this case, it's 0 trees again. Forward one. And without loss of any parking, this is not losing any parking space, you can get a right-of-way that is, go 2 forward. Forward, you're going backwards.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. You can get a bunch, you can get more than 50 trees and lose 0 parking space, and then really think about the relationship between the school, which is to the west, and Ocean Terrace to the east. So the consideration of the experience of the public right-of-way is something that we're looking to improve over time without losing the character of the existing. As I mentioned before, the city has a number of projects that they're working on that we've given some thought to and some comments on. And then just a quick view, like Jared's view of the overall is really thinking how do we connect the west of the city over to the east of the city. And that's it for me.
Thank you. There are a lot of questions, and I want to have ample time for you to get them all answered, but I do want Tom to talk for just a minute about the sort of David and Goliath thing that happened about Ocean Terrace, because the original project was ground to a halt, basically, because a group of activists got involved and said, not on our watch. That does not happen very often. Thankfully, it happened for Ocean Drive, obviously, many years ago, because we're all here celebrating it. But it happened again a couple of years ago, where the referendum, which was necessary to change the zoning to make that project viable, was defeated by a scrappy band of activists and 25,000 versus a very well-organized campaign and several $100,000 to try to get it passed. And I say that not as it's not any measure of disrespect to anybody, because obviously we just spent 40 minutes telling you about this great new project that's underway, so clearly the project is succeeding. But I do want Tom to talk about a little bit about how that happened and how we as a city and a neighborhood moved past that particular roadblock.
Thank you, and good afternoon to everybody. I think we're late enough in the morning, but it's the afternoon. Ocean Terrace is actually very interesting, and I'm going to go a little bit before the Ocean Terrace project that's before you now, just to give you kind of a background on how we got here, because I think it's important. Most of you have seen the San Tropez project. That was actually envisioned in 1994, before most people really realized the importance of Ocean Terrace. And that project kind of woke everybody up after it went under construction. And then in the late 90s, you had the designation of Ocean Terrace as an historic district, and you had the citywide downzone. And the area of Ocean Terrace was designated as an historic district for 2 reasons. One, it was partially in response to that large tower and the out-of-scale zoning that was in place at the time. But 2, it was also, I think, to recognize and create an avenue to preserve the significant low-scale architecture that also defines Ocean Terrace. A lot of that is proposed to be retained and preserved, renovated as part of the Ocean Terrace project, but there's also a block to the south where there have been some successful restorations that are adjacent to the existing Saint-Tropez. It's also important to point out that before Sander and his group purchased the property and did the assemblage, Ocean Terrace went through two major development cycles, two major development booms, and virtually nothing was done. So the people that owned the property had a lot of staying power. And when Sander first put together his assemblage, it was very important to his team and to his development pro forma to have an FAR increase. And the commission at the time bought into that, primarily because of the real estate cycles that had happened. And as I'm sure you're all aware, it was not able to be approved at the ballot box. Any increase in zoned FAR for any property or any assemblage of property in the city requires an affirmative vote by all voters within the city. And in this particular instance, the voters did not approve the FAR increase. Rather than giving up, Sander put on his hat and sharpened his pencil and went back and looked at ways that perhaps we could have an Ocean Terrace Overlay 2.0. And he took the bones of what was previously proposed as the overlay that was defeated at the ballot box in terms of FAR, and looked at it in terms of, okay, how can we make this work without the FAR increase? And we looked at the height, we looked at the setbacks, and it was a very collaborative process. And it involved two major facets. The first was the actual creation of the Ocean Terrace Overlay, which involved a code change because it involved increases in height, it involved limitations on setbacks, it involved creating a vehicle to aggregate all the properties that Jared was describing in his presentation. And it also involved changes in use. And these were important because while there's been a number of projects throughout the city, both in South Beach, Mid Beach, and North Beach, that have had significant renovations where you've done additions in the back of the property and restorations in the front, the need for an overlay here became more important because of the overall size of the assemblage and the need for it to work. Oftentimes when projects are put together piecemeal, it's easy to preserve that scale and character because it doesn't involve an entire city block. One example I can point to here is directly to the east, the Fairwind project. And when you leave here, if you haven't gone by, it's worth taking a look at because that was a 4-lot assemblage where they retained and preserved a very significant building, the Fairwind, did partial demolition to the existing contributing buildings to the north of it, and then did a large 5-story addition in the rear. And it was done very successfully because when you look at it from the sidewalk, even across the street on the sidewalk on Collins Avenue, what your experience at the street level is primarily are the historic retained and preserved buildings. This is very similar to the approach that we took at Ocean Terrace, both at the policy-making level when we put together the codes and the regulations for this, but more importantly, when the project went before the Historic Preservation Board. And I often said at the time that the Ocean Terrace Overlay was approved by the City Commission as an ordinance change that this was actually the easy part. The hard part was going to be when the development project was actually put together, designed by the architect and submitted for Historic Preservation Board approval. And it actually went very, very well. My staff, my Chief of Historic Preservation, Debbie Tackett and her staff, met very closely with Jared and Sander, their team, their architects, and they were able to come up with ways to retain the most significant parts of the buildings that needed to be either replaced or substantially removed, while retaining the more significant buildings that Jared had talked about. But I think the most important thing that came out of that, and you probably saw it on the video, was again, when you're experiencing the project from the sidewalk, either across the street or walking along the perimeter, what you get a feel for is that original scale, that original character, that original context, while still allowing for very significant development behind it to address modern needs in terms of larger residential units, back-of-house space, delivery, and loading. The project has been approved by the Historic Preservation Board. We're now just waiting for the permits to be finalized, for the construction to move forward. And I think that once this project begins to get off the ground and becomes finalized, that it will be a real catalyst. And that's why Caesar's work in terms of forming connectivities to other parts of North Beach becomes critical, because projects like this, they don't just stand alone in a vacuum. You can't just have Ocean Terrace sitting on its own. There has to be connectivity to the areas to the west, to the 72nd Street site, and then hopefully eventually to the North Beach Town Center, which is also evolving. So with that, my presentation was short, but I'm certainly here along with Sharon and Caesar, ready to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, questions? Sir.
So I have three questions, 1, 2, and 3. The first, you sort of teased us with Curry, and so I would put a question mark on that. What's up with the Curry property? And secondly, Cesar, hello, and welcome. I don't quite understand, or I'm not aware of the connection of your project with what's going on. So Corradino you're working with Corradino, you're the point person within Corradino in the development of this view. And what's the fit, who's Corradino working for?
Do you have an answer, or do you want to?
No, I'll give you the third question. And then the third question is to Tom, and you answered some of this already, but so then that sort of changes the question a little bit. And so the question was on the distinction between contributing and architecturally significant that was pointed out. And I'm not so much interested in the definitional differences, but in the treatment and the taking a look at it differences. So you pointed to the project here, and you pointed to the distinction between, or the opportunity to work in an assembled project, and so it gives the implication that probably there's more room to be creative in taking a look at protecting architectural and distinguishing between contributing and architectural in a larger mass. So then the question becomes, perhaps, how does a city handle that when there is not, sort of the collection or assembly of a large strata, and respect the distinction between architecturally significant and creative? Those are my three questions.
Okay. So Tom, why don't you take that first question, that last question first?
Okay. In the city of Miami Beach, under our historic preservation regulations, we have an historic properties database that creates or establishes a classification for all buildings in the city. And all buildings that are located within locally designated historic districts have a classification of either contributing or non-contributing. Contributing means that it contributes to the overall architectural scale, context, and history of the area. And contributing buildings can be buildings that were built as late as the mid-1960s. The city of Miami Beach has always recognized post-war architecture as contributing. Non-contributing are typically buildings that were built after that period, the 1970s, the 1980s, that don't have any architectural significance and don't contribute to the character of the surrounding area. In the Ocean Terrace area, virtually all the buildings within the assemblage had a classification of contributing. And there are varying degrees of contributing. There are some buildings within the Ocean Terrace site that were so significant that they were going to have to be substantially retained and preserved or restored, such as the Broadmoor and the Ocean Surf. Some of the other buildings that had more significance along their front facade and along their corners, the Historic Preservation Board did allow for a little bit more latitude in terms of replacement, rebuilding, because the side facades tend to be a little bit more nondescript. That's been an approach that has been used on Miami Beach since I've been here, and some of the examples that I was talking about earlier are reflective of that. For instance, the Fairwind site that's just to the east of here in that particular assemblage, the entire Fairwind building, which is the most significant of the 4-lot assemblage, was fully retained and preserved and restored. The 2 post-war modern buildings that are on the northern end of the site, significant portions of those buildings were retained, but not the entire building. There was some latitude provided for the rears of those buildings to be constructed so that they could accommodate an addition. But that's probably the biggest distinction. Code-wise, the term contributing is what is controlling. Architecturally significant refers more to the varying degrees of how significant the building is.
Yeah, what's up with Curry?
I don't know. If we can get to the bottom of it.
So thank you, Dennis. And as a side, Dennis and the young lady behind him to his right, Nancy, were my foremost inspirations on activism and preservation. So I'm glad that they're both here today. So the easy answer for me, I think this is question. Cordino holds the contract. I'm the leader of a designer. My firm, Garcia Ponce and Associates, is the leader of a designer. Was that the question, Dennis?
Holds the contract with whom?
The city of Miami Beach.
So the city of Miami Beach, this is the city of Miami Beach initiative that you, like Cordino and you are contracted to undertake.
That is correct. And the holder of that contract is 2 seats behind you. Hey, Heather. So if you have any questions, 2 seats.
So congratulations to the city. I think they're well armed to do this important work.
Thank you.
So I'll just talk a little bit about Curry's. I'm not sure what the question is. I mean, we're not
You
reinventing.
mentioned that you thought that it was the most interesting.
It was the most interesting of the buildings because if you actually look at its sort of dilapidated state today,
And it's a favorite of mine. So.
the restaurant or the architecture?
Yes.
Yes, both. I don't think.
Although the restaurant had a, sort of a peak and a valley.
And a trough. It's for those who don't know, it's sort of it was the hot spot, no prime, 112 in the 50s. It was this Polynesian steakhouse known as Curry's. I think the elements of Curry's for us is it's sort of the focus of the Collins facade. You've got a lot of very interesting architectural elements where you've got the glass block above, you've got the recessed facade back with an overhang, which is great for outdoor dining. That space, from a sort of a placemaking perspective, most likely will be a restaurant. We don't, at this stage, know what kind, really, but all we know is the restaurant that's going to be in that building or some kind of active use in that building will be within a structure that is very close, if not, basically it's the exact same thing that you would have seen 50, 60, 70 years ago. Glass block, overhang. Curry's itself might come back. It might be a really nice play. When you deal with sort of a hotel operation and operating businesses on the Ocean Terrace side, and the idea that hotels these days are less about just a room and get a drink in the bar. It's more about spreading their wings to the community, and maybe there's an opportunity for that hotel to have either in-house food and beverage or a third-party affiliated restaurant that can extend and have a presence on Collins. So it's very open, but I think it's always come up, but we've always circled back, aside from the Broadmoor and the Ocean Surf, which are sort of stand on their own pretty clearly. This one on Collins really attracted Richard Heisenbottle's attention, who's our historic architect, as well as everybody on our development team. Good? All right.
Very, sounds like it's precious to you and it's precious.
For sure, definitely.
So actually, you just touched on something, Jared, which is placemaking, which is such an important part of successful preservation, because nobody really wants to see a building plopped down in the middle of a context that doesn't make sense. It feels like you're in Disney World if that happens. You see it successfully throughout the city. You walk anywhere around Miami Beach, and it's like walking through a museum of architectural history going back 100 years all the way up to the 1111 building at Lincoln Road. And I think sometimes when people talk about preservation versus development, there's this red herring about nobody wants any change here in Miami Beach. We want it preserved in amber. And on the other side, people say, you know, let's raise the whole thing. Nothing should stay. There's nothing valuable, right? So the secret to what makes Miami Beach so wonderful and what is making this project work so well is that it is development in context with the surrounding areas. So, you know, when you walk off of Ocean Drive, the buildings on Collins still, you know, they feel like the same kind of neighborhood. They haven't been replaced by things from the 90s. So I think that's really an important element to what makes this work. Please.
Tom and the other two gentlemen can contribute to this if you know anything about this. Has any developer recently, in putting up a new building, desired to make terraces out of poured concrete, such as Bell Plaza, that you're very well aware of? Or do they all want to use the glass?
All the ones I've seen are glass, because they want to see the views.
Right.
New ones, that is.
No, even in code. Well, was it more expensive?
The southwest parcel of the block was carved out as not part of the plan. What is there and why is it omitted?
It used to be a theater, a long time ago. We'd love it to come back to be a theater again. Right now, it's sort of it houses a great local restaurant, Burgers and Shakes, which actually we'd love to keep, but the theater itself is sort of one of those shared salon, it's been converted to a sort of a shared salon type business, which is a shame. We would have liked to have included it. It's a very sort of a complicated acquisition. There's a long-term land lease, so we sort of didn't focus too much effort on it because it really doesn't impact accessibility to the site and really any, you know, we'll probably work with the owner about putting some sort of TLC to the structure, to the facade, the exterior, but for the most part, it's outside of the context of our project.
So the owner's objection, and the fact that you've not done the terms.
It's just not for sale. It wasn't for sale. It was a long-term land lease that the person who had the lease it wasn't for sale.
Yes, my question is, I heard a lot about vehicular and pedestrian traffic, but I heard nothing about using bicycles in this new plan. I hope let's get into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one of the great things about looking at the entirety of the neighborhood is, first we have the Atlantic Greenway, right, which is an amazing north-south connection on the east side connected to Ocean Terrace, so that hopefully very soon with that little missing piece, you can go from South Point all the way to Ocean Terrace on a bicycle path. That's the really wonderful element. The entire part of the study that we did was how do we connect everything to Ocean Terrace. So the east-west streets, we showed only 74th and 75th as pedestrian priority focus, but the other projects that I mentioned that the city is currently working on, 72nd, 73rd, and 77th, are bicycle greenways that the city's currently looking, and there's going to be a pilot project on either 72nd or 73rd happening very soon. So I didn't present it, but the city's working on it, and we also supported that very much.
Thank you. A couple observations, and go back to some of your comments too. The 74th and 75th Street streetscape enhancements, I think really stood out for me. I think that really changed the neighborhood, the quality of life, and also maybe property values in the whole area. I think that's great. The fact that you didn't show 72nd and said, but that things are along those scales. It seems like the whole neighborhood is going to be improved with that connectivity. You mentioned about how being able to cross Collins Avenue is being improved. What are the plans for Harding? It's just as bad or worse than Collins.
So I skipped over it because of the time, but the same concept on Collins would be on Harding. So that we would take a look at trying to improve the intersection so that it's shorter walking distances and then more clear for vehicles that pedestrians are becoming, and designing the landscape and the hardscape to cross along Harding so that, again, you feel like you're part of the Ocean Terrace design all the way when you get to Harding.
I mean, to calm the traffic coming through that
100%.
area as well. And then you mentioned about the theater, that you said there's also a theater on the other side of Commons. It was the old surf theater, and I think as you're revitalizing the neighborhood, having things besides restaurants and shops, but theaters would also be a great addition.
Agreed. We also, there's a building on the west side, just north of that theater, that, you know, we have a lease on, a long-term lease on. We wanted to buy. We have the SurfNet building, where we control that, and that's a big part of our redevelopment plan as well.
That's where the theater was, right? The SurfNet.
Just to the south of the SurfNet building. There's which right now has a surf-style t-shirt shop. Another not ideal use for that space, but hey, cities are organic things, and it's supply and demand, and neighborhoods and cities are organic, and they change, and you know, you look at the Ritz-Carlton down off Lincoln, right across the street. We've had, you know, those, I think they're closing soon, but Alvin's, you know, Wings, there's a few stores that are there that are now turning. That's, you know, a part of sort of Lincoln's sort of revival to the east of Washington, not just to the west. So.
Other questions?
It seems to me that it's easier to understand the questions than the answers. I think doing without the mic might actually make things clearer. You know?
Francie, go ahead.
Yeah, well, my question is, when is the project going to be starting? Because it seems, you know, you've got what you want, and why is North Beach not, you know, why is ground not being broken? That's the first question. The other question I have is in regards to that cul-de-sac that you mentioned for Ocean Terrace. Is that an idea, or is that already a fait accompli? Because, yeah, those are my two questions.
So everything that I presented is conceptual. Nothing has been approved by anybody. There's no funding for it. All we have is, well, so far is community support.
Okay.
And we're now working with the city to find out what elements of the recommendations they're interested in pursuing, and then how to do that. So nothing, no fait accompli anywhere near.
No, thank you so much, because in regards to connectivity, Ocean Terrace needs to be open. This needs to be accessible by car. I mean, that would be dreadful if that would be just...
But that is the proposal. We just have the ability to close. Okay.
Just so, let me just jump in here for a second. So the presentation that Cesar made is, I'm sorry.
Either one.
100 different ways. Like
Good. I know who I am, it's fine.
That Joe made over here, that Cesar made, it's a conceptual project presentation at this point that's gone to various folks in the commission and planning. There was a North Beach community town hall meeting a week or two ago. So that, again, this idea of that there's not going to be a plan dropped upon a community without getting support from the stakeholders. So the stakeholders include the planning department, the city commission who has to approve it, the people who have to finance it, and most importantly, the people who have to live with it and benefit from it. So it's very early. The goal will be, and this question was asked specifically of Commissioner Ariola when he was there, will the residents be able to be engaged and be heard on this process? And the answer was absolutely. And with Cesar at the helm, we know that will be the case. So it's just the beginning of that process. But there was another question.
Nancy's on the steering
Nancy, go, please.
It's not a question, it's really to be so happy that you are all here. How many people here are from Miami Beach itself? It's up to us to support what you hear. It's not going to happen by just hoping that one day the commission will decide to fund it. We all voted for the jail bond. There is no, I think there is no money in the jail bond for any of what you see. This has to be done. It's a public-private operation. It's not the bigger part to be funded. It has to do with Caesar's part of the project. you go down to South Beach and you look at those entry paths that go to the beach, he did that years ago with the geopond from
1991.
91. That's how that was done. So it's up to us to support this, to tell the commissioners what you want, not what they want. This is how the city should operate.